Hi, and welcome to the Trail Encounters, episode 8. We kind of hard to believe that we are at episode 8 already.
Yeah, it's been gone by quick.
It really has. And today we're going to be talking about something from John's Gospel. We had one of our small groups this week that we had this discussion, and it was really great. So we wanted to share that with you. And it revolves around Lazarus. So it's a story that a lot of people know about, but it has some really interesting, I don't know if I'd call it twist, but some interesting ways of looking at it from actually 2 points of view. So if you would like to, and we would like you to, like and subscribe and follow us on whatever platform you're on, we would really appreciate that.
So before we get into the story of Lazarus, it's really important to understand the context of what's going on because John likes to connect pieces throughout his gospel. It's really one big work, of course. That's obvious, but we sometimes forget when we look at different passages how they connect together, because sometimes some of his points are made in the connection between different elements across chapters.
I know, and that's super interesting because I don't think before I've studied with you that I've ever really looked at a book of the Bible fully, that I've always just taken it, it had verse numbers, so obviously that I thought it meant something, but it really doesn't.
Yeah, and remember, John's gospel was meant for Christian believers. It really wasn't a gospel necessarily for those new to the faith. It was an encouragement for those already in the faith. And so he's kind of offering encouragement by telling these stories and then providing some deeper connections that they really, I think, would have gotten and understood. So in this story of Lazarus, we're in this context where Jesus has gone to Jerusalem for the celebration of booths or Sukkot. So he's there, and he didn't want to go at first, but he ends up going. And while he's there, he really runs into some contentious arguments with the Jewish leadership.
So why was there contentiousness going on?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. First off, Jesus was saying things that they really couldn't get their heads around, and rightly so in some ways. I mean,
Right.
He was saying that he was sent from God, literally God's son.
Which is something that really probably threw them off.
Sure, right? And it is a big deal, right? And he's saying he's God's son. He has this authority to speak from God. And then he says, the acts I'm doing are from God. And so you can see where they'd be like, whoa, hold on, kind of cautious. That's part of it. The other part of it is the Jewish leadership was really in a awkward position between the people themselves and serving them as their religious leaders, but then also Rome's in charge. Pontius Pilate's the governor now, and Pilate is not a nice person, to say it lightly. He could have been cruel at times. And so they're trying to keep the peace between Rome and the people. And so they're very cautious of that. So there's that piece. And then the other piece is, they're in a position of authority and respect, and they don't want to lose that either. So, sometimes we will latch onto one of those reasons, but in reality, it's a combination of all of them. So when we look at these stories, you got to look at, there's a lot of tension, a lot of contentiousness, trying to figure out who the Jesus is, and more than that, what does it mean for me? My position, my power, how's Rome going to feel about this? What's going to happen? So there's just a lot of uncertainty that comes along in this particular story as we head now toward Lazarus. Now, before we get there, I want to take a moment and talk about the story that comes a couple of chapters before that in John chapter 9.
Yeah, and I will kind of take us from there. We're going to be talking about, how the different Gospels, the whole thing is important. And so this story helps lead up into our Lazarus story. In John 9, the disciples see this man that was born blind, and they ask Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents?
Now, by the way, I'll interrupt you, because I really shouldn't interrupt you, should I?
It's okay.
But the thing is, he was blind from birth. And so the disciples asked,
blind
from birth, and they ask, who sinned, him or his parents?
Which obviously it wouldn't be him.
Unless he was a little ruffian in the womb.
He might have been.
Right? They asked the question.
I had one of those.
Yeah, that's true. But that's just, that's the interesting question, right? Who sinned, him or his parents? Well, if he was blind from birth, then it probably wasn't him.
Yeah.
Right?
But, yeah.
But again, that's not the point of their question. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is that Jesus's answer to the disciples is that neither were sinful, but this man was born blind or from birth because it was to show the glory of God. Now, I know for me, I would hope that I would be like, oh, I get to be part of what God is doing in the world, but I'd also be like, this is really tough. I don't know that I'd want to have been born blind for this reason.
Yeah, that's a really important part, because this is going to connect to Lazarus. This idea that this man was born blind from birth was to glorify God. And we'll see that exact idea in Lazarus and how those two are connected. But you're right. I mean, to say that, does God cause his faithful to suffer for his own glory? That can be hard to take sometimes, right? But at the same time, remember that we are telling the story of Lazarus and this man born blind across generations for thousands of years, right? In their faithfulness and in their courage, they honor God, and we know their story. And we can do a lot worse than being those that they tell our stories about our faithfulness to God. So in a very real way, yes, their suffering is bringing God's glory, but isn't that the whole point of our life? Is to show God to the world around us. And that will cause some difficulty, that will cause some difficult times, as it does for these two. But it's an honor, really, to be allowed to participate in God's kingdom and in God's mission in the world in that way. And so there's a really honoring part to this part of the story. So yeah, you're exactly right. Okay, so picking up with the story, Jesus heals this man who was blind from birth by making mud and putting it on his eyes and sending him to go wash in a pool.
Well, why do you think he used mud? Because before he has healed people from a distance.
He has, yeah.
So why?
Or just with words, right. So the way he does this is one of the parts to the story. So Jesus heals the man on the Sabbath.
Right.
Therefore, making mud would be considered work, right? Yeah. So, and that becomes the problem. It's not that the man is healed. I mean, everybody can see that a blind man who can now see is a good thing. But the way Jesus did it, the how, becomes the problem.
Well, he's probably trying to push the envelope for what their preconceived notions are.
Yeah, their expectations, exactly right. Yeah, so he makes mud, sends the man away, and then Jesus leaves. So the man comes back, and now he can see. And people are like, is that the guy? Is that the guy who's blind? Because now he can see. And they take him to the Jewish authorities. And to make a long story short, and by the way, read this story. It's a really powerful story. This guy's faithfulness and his ability to tell the truth is really powerful. And that's all he does. He just says, this is what happened to me. This guy put mud in my eyes, and now I see. And they go into really questioning him. Were you really blind? And then they bring the parents in. Was he really blind? And they're like, well, I don't know. Ask him. And they kind of want to stay out of it. Well, long story short, all this guy does is be healed from being blind, tells his story, tells the truth, and he eventually is kicked out of the synagogue for it.
Gosh, really, that is just so crazy to me.
Yeah, he did nothing wrong other than being healed and just telling the story. I mean, and their questions basically are, this person who healed you, he couldn't have been from God because he did it on the Sabbath. And they had their own rules about the Sabbath.
And
Jesus didn't fit into their rules about the Sabbath. And Jesus taught on this before. Like, is it not better to do good on the Sabbath? And he was kind of questioning how they interpreted the Sabbath. And now it's kind of come to the forefront. And so the man is kicked out. Jesus then comes and finds him. And then Jesus says this in John 9, verse 39. I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind.
That's such an interesting statement. It's it causes you to really think, like, what is he saying? But he's talking about people who physically can see become spiritually blind because of their preconceived notions.
Right. Yeah, I mean, all this guy did is tell the truth. And although they can physically see, that truth has blinded them based on their, like you said, their preconceived notions. And then the one who was physically blind can now see both physically and spiritually. And so Jesus doesn't make anyone blind. The truth does that based on how they
Spiritually.
see and interpret the truth. Yeah, spiritually. Exactly. Yeah. So again, we've not done this story justice, but I do want to point out these connections between suffering for the glory of God and this idea of being blind and seeing. That there are people who will, when presented with the truth, will simply not see it.
We face that a lot today. I mean, oh gosh, just so much in the world. People see things one way, and someone else can look at the exact same situation and see it completely differently. So,
Yeah, and then truth becomes relative, which once that happens, it's no longer truth, right?
Exactly.
There is a truth. And I think that's where the story, and Jesus is kind of pushing that and saying, there is a truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. He says it himself. And so we'll see that being played out. Now, in chapter 10, Jesus goes on and he begins to talk to the Pharisees about his teachings and how they don't believe him. And he says, look, if you don't believe what I'm saying, believe what I'm doing. Because Jesus was doing the very things that the prophets talked about, taking care of the poor, bringing sight to the blind, the lame walk, the deaf hear, those kinds of things. He says, believe these things. And still, they don't see.
right.
And that brings us to chapter 11 and the story of Lazarus. Now, after this conflict with the Pharisees and the Jewish leadership, Jesus leaves Jerusalem and he goes into the wilderness, to the place where he was baptized by John. Now, they were threatening to stone him, to kill him, and so he escapes Jerusalem. But in the wilderness there, you have this kind of full circle. Where Jesus' ministry started with John the Baptist, he now returns to that place in the wilderness. While he is there, Lazarus becomes ill.
Right.
And Mary and Martha reach out to him, now, which is important because they know where he is. We kind of miss that sometimes, that they were so close to Jesus that when he's in the wilderness, escaping from Jerusalem, they know where he is so they can send folks to reach him. So let's take a look at verses 1 through 3 in John chapter 11. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, Lord, he whom you love is ill. So at this point in the story, we know a couple things. Jesus loves Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. He loves this family. And it says it very clearly here a couple of times. Because he's going to delay. And John wants you to know it's not because Jesus was indifferent. He loves them. And like I said, he's close to them because they know where he is. So Mary and Martha send word to Jesus that Lazarus is ill.
And so to continue on in John 11, but when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that it was Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Okay, so that's interesting. So this family's in dire need. These are people that he loved, and yet he delays for 2 more days. That seems odd.
Yeah, and again, John's very clear to say he loved them. Like, he's not just kind of blowing them off. He loves them, and yet he delays 2 days. And then you read in verse 4, Stacy, this illness does not lead to death. Rather, it's for God's glory. So here, like you said, we see this exact connection back to John chapter 9 and the man born blind. Both for the glory of God. One's born blind, the other dies now twice, right? Lazarus will die again. So he'll go through that experience twice for the glory of God.
Right. Well, that's just interesting. I mean, I know that bad things happen in the world, and God is there to help us through it. It's interesting to think of it as people are used by God for glory. I know that when you were preaching years ago, well, actually, it wasn't preaching. We had a young girl who passed away, and it was just broke our community. We were all so, devastated by it. But one of the things that you said was so profound to me is that we have a God who picks up pieces. And I see that over and over again, that no matter how broken we are, that God is still there to help us through.
Yeah, like I said, we don't know why things break.
Mm.
In the case of the man born blind and Lazarus, for some reason, these things happened for the glory of God.
Mm.
Sometimes they don't. Again, we don't know why things break. But we do believe that God does pick up pieces. And God will pick up pieces here,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he heals the blind man, he'll raise Lazarus.
Mm-hmm.
But also, there's other pieces he picks up too that we don't always see.
Right.
Sometimes suffering will pick up pieces for people we don't even know. How many people have been encouraged by the story of the man born blind or the story of Lazarus, who have seen the courage and faithfulness of the man who simply told the truth and told his story
Mm-hmm.
through the generations? So when I say God picks up pieces, there are pieces that, like I said, we don't even know about.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important thing to say here too when we look at this story.
I agree.
So now back to our story of Lazarus. 2 days have passed, which means that a day for the word to reach Jesus. He waits 2 days, and then he has a day journey back
Mm-hmm.
for a total of 4 days. And that's important because in Jewish thought at the time that within 3 days, a spirit could return to the body. But after 3 days, it would see the body's changed color and leave permanently. So Jesus is waiting these 2 days because it'll put him arriving in Bethany after 4, which means that Lazarus, by everybody's account, will be truly dead.
Well, and I don't know how the disciples did it because I know I would have been there. Shouldn't we be going?
You did that to me when we go to dinner.
Well, yeah.
So, yeah, so I'm sure they're kind of like, well, Jesus, you said it's going to be okay, but like, shouldn't we get going? You
Yeah.
know? And they don't. And he waits. And super important here is that when he finally decides to leave, he says, we're going back to Judea. And again, Bethany is not far from Jerusalem. And so they're like, hey, Jesus, weren't you just about killed when you were in Jerusalem? They tried to stone you, remember that?
Right.
And so they're kind of like, do you want to go back there right now? This may be the best time and stuff like that. And one person stands up and says this in verse 16, let us go so that we might die with him. And who is that person? Thomas. Now, here's the interesting thing about this statement. One, we don't ever really think about it because we think of Thomas as
The doubting Thomas.
the doubting Thomas.
Yeah.
That's how we, identify him. Interestingly enough, how many Thomases are there in the entire Bible? One. So there's no reason. It's like, there's the doubting Thomas and then
And Thomas the non-doubter.
there's no other Thomases. But we give him this name. Why? Because at the resurrection of Jesus, he wasn't there. And so when he goes back to the disciples, they say, hey, Jesus is alive. And he's like, I don't know.
I think they're doubting more, that Thomas is doubting them more than he's doubting Jesus rose from the dead.
I agree with you. Because after all, he's not there. Jesus shows up. And these are the same guys who ran in Gethsemane, who denied him, betrayed him, and now are hiding out in the upper room. So they are not very trustworthy at this point, right? So I think he's doubting them.
Oh, absolutely.
But here we have the story of a Thomas who's like, hey, let's go. I trust Jesus. Let's go. Let's move out. Let's go to Jerusalem. And so really powerful story. Maybe it should be Thomas the Courageous instead of doubting Thomas.
Sure, he'd appreciate that.
I hope he would. Yeah. So Jesus then leaves, heads to Bethany. And there, as he's approaching the city, Martha runs out to meet him. Now, typically you would sit in mourning for 7 days. When Jesus shows up, it's only day 4, she runs out to meet him.
Well, isn't that like kind of against the rules that she's supposed to mourn in certain places only, right?
Right, yeah, either in the house or at the tomb.
Okay.
Yep. So she kind of breaks the rules here and heads out to meet Jesus. And then in verse 21, she says this, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. Okay, now remember this statement. This is really important. we will hear this exact same statement from Mary in a little while.
Mm.
And they elicit completely different responses from Jesus.
Yeah.
So with Martha, she has this confidence, like if you had been here, he would not have died. I trust you. I have faith in your power. And then look at how Jesus responds. Let's look at verse 25. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. So a couple things. One, we have one of the most important I am statements of Jesus in John's gospel. So I am in Greek is ego eimi. It literally means I am, but it connects itself to God's name in the Hebrew Bible, Yahweh. So it's almost this statement like he's I am that you heard with Moses, like I will be with you, Moses, that kind of statement. Here, I am the resurrection and the life. And she says, yeah, I believe that. And she gives this incredibly powerful confession. You always talk about, Peter's confession and what he said and how that's such an important confession. I think hers is even better. It's like, I believe that you're the Son of God, the one who's coming into the world, that you're actually involved in the world and you're here and you're doing those things. Powerful statement. But the question is, does she fully understand what she's saying? Like, what does she expect Jesus to do? He says, I'm the resurrection and the life. Does she expect him to raise Lazarus at this point? Because a little bit from now, she'll be like, Jesus, he's been dead 4 days. So you see a little bit of kind of back and forth between her and Jesus about what does it mean to be the resurrection and the life. But in any event, it's kind of like almost this theological conversation they have. So she goes in, tells Mary. Mary runs out to Jesus, right? And she says the exact same thing as Martha. So in verse 31, the Jews who were in the house with her, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. So again, exact same statement. So how will Jesus respond to her? Will he say, hey, I'm the resurrection and the life? He won't. Verse 33, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus began to weep. This is a different response than the one he gives Martha.
Very different.
Very different, right? In fact, it says that he is greatly disturbed in spirit. Now, a lot of times we see this as sorrow.
Yeah, that's what I think of.
Well, he weeps, right? So we kind of put those two together.
Right.
But the Greek text says that he was indignant, angry almost.
Wow, you never hear that side of it.
And so why would he be angry? That's the question. Like, what is he thinking about? What's going on? I mean, if he's sad for Lazarus' death, well, he knows he's going to resurrect him.
Right, yes.
So why would he be sad? Is he sad because they're sad? I mean, in the sense that in Thessalonians, Paul says, don't mourn as those who have no hope. So as maybe they are not, trusting him to make things right.
Yeah, because you would think that maybe because he knows what's going to happen, that he just like lift up her chin and say, Mary, it's going to be fine. Come with me.
I'm going to raise him from the
Yeah,
dead.
that's what I would kind of expect.
Or is it something bigger? I mean, is Jesus seeing them weeping and Lazarus' death and all this is happening? Jesus is part of the human condition now. And now he sees his children are continuing to die and to suffer. Maybe he is just part of that, to see his children and the consequences of death.
Right. And I know, like, as a parent, you see your children when they make mistakes or somebody else harms them, and how you feel kind of powerless in some ways. No, Jesus wasn't powerless, clearly. But his children still have to go through things just for this being on this earth.
Yeah, and even like if it's our kids, even if it's their own fault, like they've got it coming, they've done something wrong, and you see the consequences of their actions,
Yeah.
it still breaks your heart, right? You
does.
still, are sometimes angry or sometimes you're sad, but they're so part of your life that you are connecting with them, right?
Yeah.
And maybe just what's going on here. Jesus is connecting with us, that he cares about us, not just like, hey, I've got eternal life figured out, I've got resurrection taken care of, you're good. Well, we still suffer here. There's still difficulties here. And he's not ignoring that. Like with Martha, yes, I'm the resurrection and the life. We've got that covered. But here today, right now, I still care and love you in the midst of the sorrow and the everyday things you have to deal with, because he's part of that. And that's a powerful thing in the story, that you have almost two sides of this, the eternal life side and the everyday side. The kingdom of heaven, which is not yet complete, but already here. And we live in the middle. And Jesus is aware of both and part of both.
Right.
And that's a really important thing we want to get out of the story too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's something else too interesting too, though. Remember, I told you about the blind man story and how they connect. Look at verse 37. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?
And the answer is yes, he could.
Right, he could have healed him from a distance.
Yeah.
He's done that before. He doesn't do that here.
Yeah.
And here we have the connection to the blind man.
Right.
What's happening here is for the glory of God. This isn't just healing a man. What's happening is for the glory of God, and we see that between these two stories now. So they approach the tomb, and Martha, when they get there, practical Martha is concerned about the smell.
Yes, and I love when you see portrayals of this scene that people are like, they cover their nose because they know it's going to be a stench. But, honestly, if he hadn't decayed, then they would have just thought it was like a setup or, it wasn't true.
It's been 4 days.
Yeah.
So they know there's a smell.
Yeah.
Okay, verse 40. Jesus says, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. So there's your answer. To Martha, to Mary, did I not tell you you would see the glory of God? And they take the stone away. And then Jesus says a prayer. Verse 41. Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me.
I love that.
So notice that Jesus has already prayed about Lazarus. For having heard me, he says.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, he's not praying then for Lazarus. He's not praying for himself.
He's praying for the people all around.
Absolutely.
Maybe new listeners or even Mary and Martha who know, but they're not seeing.
So remember we said about broken pieces? He's praying for the other broken pieces. Right? He's not just praying for Lazarus or himself.
Yeah.
But for the broken pieces around. So that they see the things that he does and believe in who he is.
Right.
Which has been his whole point in this entire section of John. And so we see here a connection all the way back to the beginning of John's gospel. John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son so that everyone who believes in him may not perish, but have eternal life. That's the glory of God.
Yeah.
And we see that so powerfully in the story as he calls Lazarus from the tomb, and by the grace of God, Lazarus obeys. But like the story of the blind man, not everybody is going to see and believe.
Right.
There are some who will remain blind. They will see the truth of Lazarus' resurrection and still not believe. And in fact, in the next chapter, we'll see that they want to kill not just Jesus, but Lazarus. So to see a man who is raised from the dead and want to kill him for it, it's the same thing as kicking a man who was born blind and healed out of the synagogue.
Yep.
There'll be people in our world that won't want to see the truth.
There's a lot of them.
They'll choose to stay blind to that truth. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing we can really do with that, Stacy, is continue to have the courage that we see here to tell the truth
Mm-hmm.
and simply to tell our story.
Mm-hmm.
That's the story that God has been gracious to me. God is part of my life. God is the resurrection and the life, and that's the one I truly follow.
Yeah, and to continue to pray for our community and the people who can't see right now,
Mm-hmm.
because there's always hope that their eyes will be opened.
There's a lot of broken pieces out there. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
because of us, all of us, that we can help pick up some of those broken pieces along the way.
That would be great. Well, thank you so much for being with us during this trail episode. And there was a lot packed in there.
Mm-hmm.
But we're so grateful to have you. If you have any questions or want us to have topics on here, please let us know. Use the link below. And when you sign up for our newsletter, there is also a place where you can ask questions of us and we'll reach out to you. So we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, and that's the whole point, is that, we talk about things that are interesting to us, or like we had in our small group this last week, but what interests you?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have questions or things you want us to talk about, please send them to us so we can kind of make this little online community here as we do our best to, like I said, pick up broken pieces and serve Jesus in this world.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you again for being part of Trail Encounters, and we'll see you next time.